So a warm welcome also from my side to the SIGMI #2 conference on sustainable and inclusive mobility. We're happy that you're all here and could make it on a rainy day like this, at least in here it's very rainy. Yes, so today I will be talking about SIGMI Research Framework, which I am developing within my bachelor thesis. What you will hear now is just the kind of first draft, first idea, so it's not really finished yet because I'm still in the middle of the process. And I will try to basically introduce to you how we, as a MicroEnergy Systems Research Group, try to approach this topic of sustainable and inclusive mobility. Yeah, as I said, it's a work in progress, so I hope you can follow along and see what we're trying to do. Before I start, I quickly want to say something about what we understand with the term research framework and why we think this is actually something worthwhile doing. So basically, this research framework has the purpose of building a foundation for any research activities that occur within this initiative. And we do call it framework instead of research agenda, which is probably the more classical term that most people use. As of now, we don't have any specific topics that we want to concentrate our research on, but rather want to have something like a fundament of values that build the basis for the SIGMI activities. Okay, as was already mentioned, what SIGMI stands for, I just want to quickly repeat that again so everyone is clear about that. So SIGMI, as many people might have guessed, is an acronym, and it stands for the following. First, we have sustainable. How we understand that, I will talk about that later as well. Then, of course, inclusive for the first I, and then it also represents, the G represents global, because we want to not only concentrate on areas that we know, but also explore areas that we might not know or that are not part of our everyday life. And then, of course, mobility. And here I want to say a little bit more, because mobility and transport is often an issue when we talk about this range of topics, because for many people, it represents more or less the same, and it is often used the same. And we also sometimes fall in this trap of using it as synonyms, but it is actually not the case. And I will quickly elaborate kind of what we understand it, but actually during the first conference, Seema Mowry did a pretty good illustration of how to differentiate between those, and we put her video on YouTube a few days ago, so you can check it out after today. So I'm basically just repeating what she's saying there because it's a really good presentation, I think. So transport can be seen as the visible part of mobility, the actual individual actions of how you get from one place to the other. Whereas mobility also comprises more things. One thing is the potential of actions, the potential of movements, which describe the trips that a person would like to make or would have liked to have made in the past. And then there's another layer to it, which would be the freedom of the action, even having the possibility to consider doing a trip, because everyone knows sometimes there's so strong limitations that you can't even imagine thinking of doing something. And so that's what we try to understand when we talk about mobility. So then there's one more initial missing for the SIGMI, and that's the initiative, which just gives the organizational frame to this. Now that you know what the SIGMI actually stands for, I'll quickly just present my agenda for this, probably next 15 to 20 minutes. Let's see how I'm doing with the time, because we're a bit behind. So first off, I would like to quickly introduce who we are as MicroEnergy Research Group, and also the SIGMI team, so who's behind this initiative and who's been working for the past few months to keep this going. And then I quickly introduce how the SIGMI came to be and what kind of the story or the idea behind us, and also the motivation for having this initiative. And further on, I would like to introduce very, very roughly approaches by international organizations to kind of understand how this topic is viewed by other people, other relevant people, that is. And yeah, from these different approaches and also the background of the MicroEnergy Systems Research Group and yeah, also the team members itself, I want to quickly go over the SIGMI Research Framework, which I am developing in my thesis, as I said. And the heart of this is the so-called SIGMI tree, as you can also see in our backgrounds with the 3 leaves, which I will be mainly using to introduce the concept. And lastly, I will finish off with the ongoing research activities and how we generally intend to continue our work in this initiative. Okay, then let's start with MicroEnergy Systems Research Group. I realized that I forgot the systems for some reason. I don't know, working too late probably. So as the name suggests, this research group is mainly researching about energy-related topics. And it is actually interdisciplinary research association, you could call it, and it's based at the TU Berlin, more specifically at the Work Group for Infrastructure Policies, which we call the WIP. So if you ever hear that term again, you know what it's about. What I would like to show is a short excerpt from the research agenda of the research group, which I'm going to read out right now. So the MES Research Group aims to understand, improve, innovate, and promote the development and transformation of fair and sustainable decentralized energy systems by taking the micro perspective. I know this is a lot of words, but there's kind of 3 aspects that are important for the SIGMI. So the first one is this idea of understanding. That's one of the main goals of the SIGMI, to try to understand more about this topic of sustainable inclusive mobility. We don't, because we come from very different backgrounds, which I will introduce in a bit. We first want to try to understand what is this topic about, to see how does it impact us coming more from an energy related background. Then another thing that appears in this description is fair and sustainable, which relates very much to the title of the initiative being sustainable and inclusive. And lastly, the idea of taking the micro perspective is also something that we think is very important, that you start something bottom up and look at the small aspects of it in order to really grasp something and really have a chance of also improving something, basically. And as I said already, it's a cooperation with the Work Group for Infrastructure, which also influences the actual research framework later on. Okay, then we come to the SIGMI team. The first person I want to quickly introduce, which you already saw. I think you've seen everyone so far already. So the kind of initiator of the whole thing is Nora Kebir, and who's really leading this whole initiative with passion and knowledge and a lot of energy, which we're very grateful for. Without her, this would not be existing here. And then we have the more scientific support from Professor Christian von Hirschhausen here from TU Berlin. And then we have our, I would say, most senior researcher who has a profound background in transportation, which is Mai Asman, which you will also get to know more of today and tomorrow. And then you also have met already Madhuli Karau, who's actually the person who comes the most from this kind of sustainable mobility field, as she's studying the Sustainable Mobility Management MBA here at TU Berlin. So she's probably the most, the person who's you can't say the most expert, but she should know quite a lot about it. And then of course there's me, and I'm actually pretty new to this topic. I'm also coming more from a energy background, but I've already had always had a big interest in this topic, and I'm really happy to be working in this initiative, and so curious what will come out of it and where it goes. So now that you know the team, I quickly want to go over how this initiative came to be. I will present a very reduced way of thinking, and yeah, it's of course the reality is always a bit more complex, but I think it's a good way of depicting how, yeah, what the motivation is and how the thought process kind of went. So I want to start with the goal of MicroEnergy Systems, and that is to have 100% renewable energy by 2030, if possible. We really hope so. So having this goal in mind, and then looking at current developments globally, something like increased global mobility, which is of course pre-pandemic times, and also in many parts of the world, an increase in sales of electric vehicles. We realized that these challenges in the mobility sector, which by politicians are often addressed by just promoting electrical vehicles, is actually quite a challenge for us, meaning the energy sector people, and therefore also a challenge for our goal of reaching this 100% renewable energy, because when the energy demand rises, it definitely impacts us. Therefore, the next thing that follows is the realization that there's a very strong interconnectivity, also in the interdependence between the energy sector and the mobility sector, which has the consequence that, we should look at this topic further. And as I said, we want to try to understand the mobility sector more and try to be more aware of how it can impact the energy sector in the future. And the consequence of that is the SIGMI. Recently, Nora Kibia introduced this kind of thought process to an external person. I had the luck to listen to this, and there's one thing I kept in mind, something she said. I'm paraphrasing now, so I hope I match what she said, which is more or less, when talking about energy, we're experts when we speak. In the topic mobility, everyone is an expert. And from this, I take that it's okay that we approach this topic, even though we might not know that much about it yet. And that it's something that's accessible for everyone, and that maybe also everyone should concern themselves with. Yeah. Okay. Now I want to continue with the different approaches by international organizations. Organizations isn't actually the right word, because there's many different kind of, let's say, entities involved, and everyone has their own kind of structure. We have organizations, alliances, partnerships, initiatives. Yeah, lots of people in the end who think about the subject and deem it important enough to work on it. So this idea of looking at these different approaches came from our consultant, Frank Wevering, who suggested to us, in order to find our own identity, that we should first look at what is already there out in the world and try to understand and analyze it in order to know what we in the end see as important, and what we maybe can learn from them and take from them, and what we maybe don't think is as important. So there's 5 different organizations that I looked at during my thesis, basically, and there is a kind of preliminary version of the paper also available on the website. So if everyone wants to actually learn more about these initiatives, please go check it out. You can download it. So what we look at is from the United Nations. It has a very long name. It's United Nations Secretary General's High-Level Advisor Group on Sustainable Transport. United Nations for short. And then we have from the World Bank, the Sustainable Urban Mobility for All. And this is more of an alliance of different organizations, different people, different NGOs, lots of different things. And then next up, there's the so-called SLOCAT, which is the Partnership on Sustainable Low Carbon Transport. And next up, we have CVITAS, which actually stands for City Vitality and Sustainability. But they mainly concern themselves with transport. And lastly, we have the TUMI, which is the Transformative Urban Mobility Initiative. Now I will not present all of them individually because we don't have the time for that. And if you're interested, as I said, you can read all of that in the paper. There's lots of pages where you can get to know all of these in detail. I only want to do a short summary of what they have in common and what kind of consequences we took from that for the SIGMI. Yeah, so the first thing that is quite obvious when looking at these different approaches is that they all, or most of them at least, have a clear relation to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Either they consider their work as a contribution to achieving these goals, or they base their work on the goals. So it's definitely something important and that needs to be kept in mind. Because these goals are very internationally recognized, so it's a good source to consider. And then there's during the paper, I'm doing an analysis of kind of the keywords that are used in each initiative and try to put them together and find out what ideas and what actual words exist in all the different approaches. And there's two words or more ideas that appear in every single one, and that's that it's supposed to be green, and meaning kind of environmentally friendly, and safe. This aspect of safe or safety we didn't really consider at the beginning and realized that it's maybe something we should really look at more. So it's really good that we actually looked at these different approaches, because that's something we completely overlooked at the beginning. So it's always nice to realize that you actually learn something from what you're doing. And the last part is that this idea of inclusivity does also appear in all of them, but in very different forms. But it's generally to say that all of them focus on people, and especially different kinds of people, and aim to improve the lives of people and their well-being. So that's something that you really want to also incorporate in the SIGMI framework. Yeah, so now we go over to the actual framework, or like how it came to be. So I first kind of quickly state kind of how we came to it and where it comes from, basically. So of course we incorporate the different findings from the approaches, as I mentioned on the slide before. But also the background of the MicroEnergy Systems Research Group and the Work Group for Infrastructure Policies, because that's where we're from. That's our theoretical and knowledge background, basically. So the aspect of energy, of course, is something that we will consider for the SIGMI, probably more than maybe others would. But of course, also the individual values of the team members play a role. I think most of us are quite into using bikes, for example, as a mode of transportation. So that's something that we all agree on, that maybe cars are not necessary. We hope maybe one day that can become reality. Yeah, and then for the methodological approach, it's mainly been a grouping and organizing of these different ideas and concepts into a three-dimensional framework, which is the SIGMI tree. It's a tree, as the name says, and it has 3 leaves. And our idea was that a tree basically only lives when all the parts are there. So you can look at the individual leaves, in this case, individually, but it only really makes sense when you consider it as a whole, because a tree is only a tree with everything, the stem and the leaves. So we have these 3 dimensions, which we've discussed a lot, what they should be and how we should name them. And the first one is very much motivated by the MicroEnergy Systems background, 100% renewable. And apart from giving it a dimension and something, an aspect that we want to take as a foundation for the SIGMI, we also thought of what else can be understood, how it can be understood and how to describe it. So we have a few kind of keywords, which is really still the first approach. We will keep working on this. But one aspect that's very important for this dimension is the idea of efficiency, which is actually a keyword that appears also in many of the different approaches. Then something that's more related to our own values is this idea of being independent from cars, which also is related to renewable energies. And another idea that comes more from the WIP, the work group on infrastructure policies, is the idea of sector coupling. I guess many people have heard of this term, but it's basically just that when you have one sector, in this case the energy sector usually, and this one manages to actually reach certain goals, how can you use this to transfer to other sectors? So how can you use the low carbon footprint of the energy sector, which is getting lower in Germany at least, to also lower the carbon footprint in other sectors? Then we have the second leaf, which is human-centered. We decided to call it human-centered and not just inclusive, because we believe that human-centered incorporates more and generally kind of states from which point of view we want to look at the whole thing. So of course, it is very closely related to being inclusive, because when it's human-centered, it should include all humans and not just certain humans, and also try to take the perspective of different types of people. Another very fundamental idea is the idea of access, that you give access to everyone. So that not just the infrastructure maybe works for everyone, but they also have a way of accessing it. May it be through money or times or whatever other limitations there are. And then the aspect of that mobility is supposed to be healthy is something that we discussed quite a lot as well, because the ultimate goal is, I think, for most sustainability related goals or works, is that you want it to be beneficial for the human. You want to increase the well-being in the end. So having this aspect of healthy is very important to achieve that as well. And as I mentioned before, the idea of safety is still, well, not new to us, but it's something that we didn't quite consider at the beginning, but realized that it's of course very related to health. But yeah, in order for it to really care about humans, it should always be safe, and these aspects should be considered. And then there's the last idea about human-centered. That's the idea of sufficiency, which you will also learn about more later. So I don't really want to say much about this, because you will have a whole presentation about that later. Then we come to the last aspect, which is achievable, because we realized when you have some kind of mobility concept that is based on 100% renewable energies and human-centered, it still needs to be achievable, because if it's not, there's no point in having all of this if you can't actually implement it. So we chose this third dimension to always remind ourselves that that achievability should always be considered as well. That's of course in terms of if it's actually legally possible, if it also relates to, well, political goals and targets. So if there's actually interest in society to implement these kind of things. And something that also comes from the MicroEnergy Systems Research Group is this idea of doing something on a small scale, to start small, to start bottom up. So we also put this into the framework to remind ourselves that it's okay to also start with one thing, one street, one place. And yeah, the next idea is that it should be resilient. This is actually also a term that appears in many of the different approaches by these organizations, because even if the idea itself is really good, if it like any type of infrastructure, which is also one of the SDGs, should always work in also adverse conditions or extreme situations, and to ensure that the idea of access always stays, and that not suddenly, just because there's a bit harsher weather, suddenly all these mobility infrastructures can't be used anymore because they can't actually withstand the conditions. And one last aspect that is, probably one of the most important ones when it comes to achievability, that it has to be affordable, not just affordable for the people using it, but also affordable for the people building it and being responsible for the implementation. Yeah, this is already everything I want to say to the SIGMI tree and the SIGMI framework, because I'm still working on it. So hopefully in 1 or 2 months I will be done with the thesis, and then there should be a more in-depth research framework. And so I just want to quickly finish off with how our research activities look like and what we want to be doing in the future. So within this initiative, how it is right now, we have one bachelor thesis, that's my thesis, and we also have 2 master theses, which are by Maya Asman and Madeline Rau, who will now quickly introduce their topic, because I felt they can do it better than I can. So if you could start, Maya, that would be great.
Yes, thank you, Xenia. So in my master thesis, I study industrial engineering, and I'm now in my 3rd master semester. And I focus mostly on the achievability or the achievable leaf of our tree, because in my master thesis, I want to look at good practices in sustainable and inclusive mobility and check whether they are transferable to different contexts and what the success factors of that transfer are. So I'm currently looking into the like literature review and just learning about learning how people learn, how institutions learn from each other, and what is actually transferable and what is a good practice. I haven't decided on the policies or practices that I want to focus on yet, but I'm thinking about either pop-up bike lanes, because they're good examples from Bogota and Berlin, and there was some transfer, or maybe also gender action plans in mobility, because there are also some good examples out there. But as I said, I'm still reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. So finalizing this section, I will be presenting the uptake of public transportation, which is run by Green Energy in the countries Bangladesh and Madagascar. So basically researching on the political, social, economic, and demographic standpoint of the countries, and make a comparison with the global north countries, basically. So how crowd and traffic management is being implemented, how it has evolved over the years, and probably give some recommendations. And yes, I hope I finish our time. And yes, so, but moving forward, we can actually go over to the students' presentation, who selected the topic based on our last SIGMI conference in November 2020. And now,
Malika, I have actually 2 more things to say. Sorry to interrupt you. There was bad communication on my side. I'll give the word back to you in a moment, okay? Sorry. Yeah, we should have talked about this more. But as Marlika just said, there's also, apart from the 3 theses, 6 seminar papers that developed from the last conference, which will be presented today. So we also don't know everything yet. So we're also looking forward to this and see what they've been working on. And then going forward with SIGMI, the next thing that would kind of be happening is the Mobility Week this year in September, where if you want to learn more about that, tune in tomorrow, because there will be a very interesting talk, I believe, from Juan Caballero from Eurocities, who's also responsible for the organization of the Mobility Week, who will introduce to us the concept of what it actually is, how it developed. And SIGMI also tries to actually develop a few mobility actions for this week. And in order to do that, we offer 3 workshops tomorrow, which we will also introduce later. Trying to think of what you can do to kind of show people what alternative uses there are for traditional infrastructures that are related to mobility, to transport. And other than that, there might be another SIGMI conference in 2022. If we have not learned everything by then, probably we won't. So let's see about that. That's all from my side. Thank you for your attention. I hope you could follow along what the research framework is supposed to be look like, and how SIGMI came to be. That's all from my side. So now I hand back over to Madhulika. Thank you.